Welcome back, everybody. This is Parker Hurley. This is the 30th team in our 32 teams offseason preview, going through every team's offseason in May. I wrote questions about their regular season. We're going to answer how those regular season questions went throughout the season, and then I will come up with 5 more questions that we will need answered by the time by the NFL draft is over. So check out the first 29 picks. We're going in draft order. So the first 29 picks in the NFL draft I've already completed, talked about what they need to do this offseason. Now we are on to the Denver Broncos, the second team who was eliminated in the AFC championship game. And obviously the big talking point around the Denver Broncos is, what if Bo Nix was healthy? They at least would have had a better shot against the Seattle Seahawks. And all of those thoughts. So going to be a really interesting offseason for this team. Going back into May, my first question was, how does Pat Bryant fit into the wide receiver room? They spent a third-round pick on him, so they obviously see him involved as a rookie. Then I talked about how Sean Payton talked very highly of him, but they had a rookie in Devon Vele who was going to play the slot as well. Questions about Troy Franklin, and it turned out that they traded Vele, and then Courtland Sutton and Troy Franklin ended up being the two leaders on the outside, and they slowly emerged Pat Bryant. And as the season went on, Pat Bryant ended up being the starting slot receiver, and he got hurt in the playoffs as well, which put a damper on their entire offensive upside. But he ended up winning that slot job. Even before the season, they had moved on from Vele. And then Marvin Mims is kind of more of that fourth receiver in the depth chart, more of a gadget type of player, more of a defined role, whereas Sutton is more of the X, Franklin the Z, and then Pat Bryant is the slot. So moving into next year, I don't know if Pat Bryant has the Michael Thomas upside that Sean Payton was talking about, but he obviously proved in his rookie season that he's probably going to be a part of the mix when he can stay healthy here. Second question was, is this going to be the RJ Harvey show? Similar to Pat Bryant, they took him pretty high in the NFL draft. They don't have a bunch of big options there. Whereas when this team traded Vele in the middle of the offseason, after I had wrote these articles, they had acquired J.K. Dobbins after I wrote this article. So when I had talked about it, I said this running back room is completely bare, although they could add somebody like Dobbins, and they did add somebody like Dobbins, and he ended up cutting in for the majority of the season, although he ended up getting hurt. And by the end of the season, it was the RJ Harvey show, although that ended up limiting the entire upside of the offense because Harvey was a better receiver and better in space, but he isn't a downhill, get you between the tackles type of runner. So they were missing that power type of punch to him, which they did have with Dobbins, but once he left, they didn't have it with nearly the same sort of impact. So it ended up RJ Harvey will be probably the number 1 or like a 1A next year because he's such an explosive weapon, and they're going to find ways to get him the football. But they're going to need that downhill complement because it gives RJ Harvey the ability to get out in space. So technically right there, I guess. Third question, where does Jahdae Barron align? They drafted him in the first round. He was a slot/safety, could play outside cornerback. But when you looked at the Denver Broncos secondary, they didn't really have significant needs there. I talked about how he could play the slot for McMillan, and then he could play in safety for Brandon Jones, and ended up that – or McLaughlin, I'm sorry, Jaleel McLaughlin, not McMillan. But either way, he ended up not really playing whatsoever, playing a little bit of dime role. And now the question is, because McLaughlin's a free agent, do they trust Barron in the first round to take that step this season? Or was he just so poor that they actually have legitimate fears about him this season? I think that it was because McLaughlin played so well that they just didn't have a role for him, and they knew that McLaughlin could play well and get paid in free agency this offseason. That's probably what they're expecting. So now they have somebody to step right up, and they don't have a need at cornerback moving forward. So he really didn't do anything as a rookie, and that was somewhat expected. Can Evan Ingram take off in this offense was my fourth question. He really didn't. He ended up behind Adam Troutman in overall snaps, and he was the third wide receiver behind Courtland Sutton and Troy Franklin, but he only had like 400 yards and 1 touchdown. And a lot of people, especially even when Sean Payton was talking him up as, oh, this is a very important signing for us, this is the type of player we need, he didn't do nearly any of that. So for the most part, Ingram was not the type of player that they wanted when they signed him. He did not live up to their expectations. My last question is, can the defense avoid regression? Talked about how, they just kind of were hitting at the right time. Could they continue to ascend? Is adding Barron going to help reduce the need for regression? And they kind of, for the most part, just did the same thing that they did in seasons prior, and they were able to host an AFC championship game. And it's just that happened that their quarterback got hurt. So still a very good defense. They did have a few flaws. They weren't quite as elite as the season prior, but then the offense took a step forward compared to the season prior. So it was a better overall team when you look at it. So the Denver Broncos, like I said, the arrow is pointing in the right direction. As long as Sean Payton and Bo Nix are together, it seems like, this is only the second year with them, and they made it to the playoffs the first year. They made it to the AFC championship the second year. So it seems like as long as those two are together, the quarterback and head coach combination, they're going to be a hard out in the AFC. So moving to their potential offseason projections, Bo Nix, like I said, coming off of his injury, I don't think it's serious to the point where they should be wondering who's going to start week 1 or wondering if they should upgrade backup over Jarrett Stidham. Sean Payton's always liked Jarrett Stidham. He had like 2 really bad plays that cost them the game against the Patriots, but that's the AFC championship for a backup quarterback. It happens, so it's not like they have a crying need there. At running back, they do have R.J. Harvey, and then they need somebody else to replace J.K. Dobbins or upgrade over Dobbins. Like I said, I think they're looking for more downhill between the tackles power type of back there. At wide receiver, they should be fine with Sutton, Franklin, and Pat Bryant. Marvin Mims is due a contract after this year. I'm not sure if they would extend him as that number 4 gadget player, but all 4 of them, their top 4 receivers from last year, are going to be back this year, so I don't see that being an issue. Adam Troutman will be a free agent this year, so I know Sean Payton brought him when he drafted him with the Saints, brought him over here when he came to Denver, so I could see Troutman being re-signed here, but I could also see them wanting to try and upgrade at tight end, and in this being a decently tight end draft, maybe they take a swing at somebody at some point in the draft here that has, whereas Troutman's a bit of a blocker, Ingram's a bit of a receiver, neither of them can do much of the other. Maybe they could try and get a little bit more of a combo type of player. So running back and tight end are their big needs there. On the offensive line, they're bringing back both tackles. They're bringing back Miners and Powers on the interior, and they already extended Wattenberg. So their 5 starters on the offensive line are back, and they really don't have serious needs for the future. So it would have to be a best player available for them to draft at that position. Jonathan Cooper and Bonito will both be back next season. They could use a little bit of depth, but they have enough that you think between Quay Robinson, Jonah Ellis, guys like that they don't have a crying need here. And then Zach Allen and DJ Jones will be back. I think they're going to lose John Franklin Myers. I don't know if they have that guy on their roster, so I could see them replacing along the interior defensive line. But I think they're going to cut or lose Myers because they don't have a significant need for him. They just would like some depth there. And for the money that Myers is going to get, they want to get a little bit cheaper, maybe even younger if they could invest like a 3rd-round pick on the defensive line. Dre Greenlaw was super up and down last year. Injuries, erratic play, everything like that. Ended up 3rd on the team in snaps behind Justin Strnad and Alex Singleton. Greenlaw's back. Strnad and Singleton are free agents. I don't know if they bring either of them back or if they try to get, like I said, younger there. They have Drew Sanders. He missed the whole season, coming back as well. So could it be Sanders and Greenlaw with a rookie in the mix? Could they add another free agent? Do they re-sign maybe like Strnad because they've liked him more than maybe some other teams will? But they definitely have to do something at linebacker this offseason. And hopefully they really want Dre Greenlaw to just simply play better because they signed him in free agency, expecting him to be an impact player. So like I said, I don't see McLaughlin coming back unless they really have fears about John A. Barron. And then Surtain's obviously very good. Riley Moss was the guy that everyone picked on last year. And I mean, it's not like he's a bad cornerback. It's just when there are no good other options, everyone's going to go at Riley Moss. And he's due a free agent. He's going to be a free agent after this year. So the question is whether they extend him this offseason. I'm going to lean to no and think that maybe they continue to draft here and look for that high upside second guy that if they could strike gold in one of those picks, he develops into a better player than Moss. Because like I said, all of a sudden, like with Lassiter on the Texans, he's a little bit better than Moss. And now it's so hard to pick on anyone on that Texans defense because Stingley's that top dog. But when you throw at Lassiter, you pay for it. And it seems like Surtain's that top dog. But when you throw at Moss, at times he makes plays, but he isn't quite on that Lassiter level where he's making a lot of impact plays. And that's why I think maybe they'll continue to draft at the position. But then Hufanga and Jones are back this season, and they both started at safety last year. And I know Jones, they could extend him, but they also could just play it out with him right now. So they're pretty much set there, and they could another position where they could start to look a little bit younger. And that's where they're in a good spot roster-wise, where they don't have significant needs. When we go into their needs, I have it running back, tight end, and linebacker. And if they bring back Stranad, Singleton, or one of the two, linebacker is a lot less of a need. So running back and tight end, they obviously do have needs. And then if they bring back Troutman, they really need to go and get some sort of dynamic running back. But then it is things like cornerback to replace Riley Moss, safety for the upcoming Brandon Jones extension. John Franklin Myers is going to get paid. Let's add defensive line depth, even though we have two starters who, he'll be the third or fourth guy in that rotation. That still may be one of the biggest needs that they have in the first round is defensive line, even though they have DJ Jones and what's his name, starting there. So they don't have significant needs, and that's a good spot to be for the Denver Broncos. So brings us into my questions. How can they find a complement to RJ Harvey? Do they draft significant draft capital? Do they spend free agency? Is it just to keep cheap power back because they know Harvey will be the lead player? How can they address the skill players? Is it tight end? Do they continue to just be satisfactory at receiver? Do they upgrade over that? My third question, is it time for Jahdae Barron in the slot? Like I said, do they extend guys like Riley Moss, Brandon Jones, or is it time for upgrades in the secondary, getting younger? And then how do they address interior defensive line depth? So those are my 5 questions for the Denver Broncos. I'm Parker Hurley. That's the 30th overall team. Check out the first 29 on my YouTube channel, and we'll be back with team number 31 as we get closer to the final 2 teams here, the Super Bowl teams. So we will talk to you guys soon.